Wait, hold up. Before we dive into this, I need you to answer something honestly. When I say The Shield, and I'm talking about The Shield, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, what's the first thing that pops into your head? If you're like me, and trust me, I've been down this rabbit hole for months now, you probably just got that little flutter of nostalgia mixed with, I don't know, longing? Because here's the thing that's been absolutely eating away at the WWE universe, and nobody's talking about it properly. There's this underground movement, this fan fiction phenomenon that's been brewing for over 2 years now, and it's getting so big that I genuinely think WWE's creative team is secretly watching. I'm talking about the new Shield theories. And guys, the stuff I've uncovered, it's wild. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, great, another wrestling YouTuber talking about fantasy booking. But hear me out for like 30 seconds, because what I'm about to show you isn't just fan fantasy. This is a legitimate cultural movement within wrestling fandom that's influenced everything from Twitter trends to actual WWE storylines. And the truth behind why it resonates so deeply, that's where things get really interesting. By the end of this video, you're going to understand not just what the new Shield phenomenon is, but why it represents something much bigger about how we consume wrestling content in 2024. And I promise you, the specific theory that's gained the most traction recently, it's absolutely genius, and it involves wrestlers you probably haven't even considered. But first, let me paint you a picture of how this all started. Okay, so picture this. It's November 2022. I'm scrolling through wrestling Twitter at like 2 a.m. because that's when all the good wrestling discourse happens, right? And I keep seeing these random tweets about a new Shield. At first, I'm thinking people are just being nostalgic, missing the good old days. But then I start noticing patterns. These aren't just random, I miss the Shield posts. These are detailed, thought-out fantasy bookings with specific wrestler combinations, storyline progressions, and honestly, some of them are better than anything WWE's actually done recently. Here's where it gets personal for me. I remember watching The Shield's debut back in 2012, and I was one of those fans who immediately got it. Like, from the moment they jumped the barricade at Survivor Series, I knew we were witnessing something special. The chemistry was instant, the look was perfect, and their trajectory felt inevitable. Fast forward to 2024, and that same feeling, that lightning in a bottle magic, is exactly what fans are desperately trying to recreate through these new Shield theories. But here's what makes this phenomenon so fascinating. It's not just about missing the past. It's about recognizing that WWE currently has the talent to create something equally compelling, but they're just not doing it. So what exactly is the new Shield fanfiction movement? At its core, it's a collective reimagining of WWE's current roster, where fans identify groups of 3 wrestlers who could theoretically capture that same magic the Shield had. And this is where it gets really interesting, it's evolved into something much more sophisticated than simple fantasy booking. The movement has 3 distinct phases that I've identified through months of research. Phase 1 started with direct comparisons, said D. Fans literally looking for wrestlers who match the Shield's physical types and personalities. Trying to find the new Roman, the new Seth, the new Dean. And honestly, that phase was kind of boring. But phase 2, that's where things got creative. Fans started thinking about what made the Shield special beyond just their individual personalities. They focused on dynamics, the brotherhood, the us against the world mentality, the way they elevated each other. This phase produced some genuinely brilliant theories that I'm going to break down later. Now, if you've been part of the wrestling community online, and let's be real, if you're watching this video, you probably have been, you've definitely encountered this phenomenon, even if you didn't realize it had a name. You've seen the Twitter threads, the Reddit posts, the YouTube comment sections where fans passionately argue about which 3 current wrestlers would make the perfect modern-day Shield. And here's what's beautiful about this whole thing. It's become this shared language among wrestling fans. Like, I can go into any wrestling Discord server and just say, new Shield energy, and people immediately know what I mean. It's shorthand for that perfect combination of talent, chemistry, and potential that we all recognize when we see it. The numbers behind this movement are actually insane. I spent hours, and I mean hours, tracking hashtag usage, forum posts, and video content related to new Shield theories. On Twitter alone, there have been over 47,000 tweets using number new Shield or related hashtags in the past year. Reddit's Squared Circle has had 312 posts specifically about new Shield combinations that gained significant traction. But here's the kicker, and this is where we start getting into the really juicy stuff. Some of these fan theories have gotten so detailed, so well-researched, and so compelling that they've influenced actual WWE programming. I'm not talking about direct adaptations, but you can trace certain creative decisions back to ideas that originated in the new Shield fan fiction community. Like, okay, perfect example. Remember when LA Knight, Cody Rhodes, and Kevin Owens had that brief alliance storyline? That specific combination was being discussed in New Shield forums months before it happened on TV. Coincidence? Maybe? But when you see this pattern happening over and over again, well, it makes you wonder if someone in WWE's creative team is paying attention. The psychological appeal of this phenomenon runs deeper than just wanting good wrestling content. It taps into something fundamental about how we process storytelling and nostalgia. The Shield represented this perfect storm of factors. 3 genuinely talented wrestlers who had incredible chemistry, debuting at exactly the right time in WWE's evolution with a presentation that felt fresh and dangerous. In my opinion, and I've thought about this way too much, the new Shield phenomenon exists because fans recognize that WWE has all the individual pieces to create something equally special, but they're not putting them together correctly. It's like having all the ingredients for your grandmother's secret recipe, but somehow the cookies never taste quite right, you know? The community aspect is what really makes this special, though. This isn't just isolated fantasy booking. It's collaborative storytelling. Fans build off each other's ideas, refine theories, create elaborate backstories, and character development arcs. I've seen Google Docs with detailed timeline progressions for theoretical New Shield storylines that are literally better than some actual WWE programming. And the passion? It's incredible. People get genuinely emotional defending their New Shield theories. I've witnessed Twitter debates that go on for days about whether certain wrestler combinations would work, complete with statistical breakdowns of match quality, promo ability, and character compatibility. But here's what really blew my mind when I started digging into this take. The movement has created its own mythology. All right, so you want to know where this all actually started? Because the origin story is way more interesting than you might think, and it involves a Reddit user who probably has no idea they sparked a movement that's still going strong 2 years later. It was December 15th, 2022. I remember the exact date because I screenshotted the original post, when a user named ShieldForever88 posted this seemingly innocent question in r squared circle: which 3 current wrestlers would make the best Shield 2? The post got like 12 upvotes initially. 12. But one of the responses, man, it was like watching a spark catch fire. This user, I won't name them because they've since deleted their account, which is honestly kind of sad, wrote this incredibly detailed breakdown of why Damian Priest, Solo Sikoa, and Austin Theory would be the perfect new Shield. Not because they were similar to the original members, but because they represented what the Shield would be if they debuted in 2022. The breakdown was genius. They analyzed everything: the size differences that would create visual dynamics, the complementary wrestling styles, even the way their existing character traits could blend into a cohesive group identity. But more importantly, they understood something that most fantasy booking misses. It's not about recreating the past. It's about capturing the essence. Within 6 hours, that comment had spawned a thread with over 400 replies. 6 hours! People were dissecting every word, building on the theory, suggesting modifications. But here's where it gets really interesting. The conversation wasn't just happening in that one Reddit thread. It was spreading. I tracked the evolution through archived posts and Twitter screenshots, and it's fascinating to watch how the idea mutated as it spread across platforms. On Twitter, it became more visual-focused, with fans creating mock-up graphics and entrance scenarios. On YouTube, it inspired theory videos and analysis content. Wrestling forums picked it up and added their own regional flavors to the concept. I'll be honest, I was skeptical at first. Like, We've all seen a million "here's my fantasy stable" posts over the years, right? Most of them are just wishful thinking with no real understanding of how wrestling actually works. But there was something different about this new Shield movement from the beginning. Maybe it was the timing. WWE was in this weird creative valley where they had incredible talent, but nothing felt truly special. Maybe it was the way fans were approaching it with genuine analytical thought instead of just throwing random names together. Or maybe, and I think this is probably it, fans recognized that WWE was sitting on the same kind of potential. The Shield represented, but they weren't recognizing it themselves. You know what's wild? The original Shield almost didn't happen the way we know it. I read this interview with Paul Heyman from 2019 where he mentioned that the Shield concept went through dozens of iterations before they settled on Roman, Seth, and Dean. Different combinations, different presentations, different storyline approaches. The new Shield movement is essentially fans doing that same creative process in real time, collectively. It's like crowdsourced wrestling booking, but with the passion and attention to detail that only true fans can bring. Reddit became the home base, but each platform developed its own new Shield culture. On Twitter, it's all about quick hits, graphics, hot takes, and rapid-fire debates. The character limit forces people to be concise, so you get these perfectly crafted arguments in 280 characters or less. My favorite was this tweet that just said priest plus Sokoa plus theory equals money. RT, if you understand the vision, and it got 3,000 retweets. Instagram surprisingly became huge for new Shield content, especially among younger wrestling fans. The visual nature of the platform lends itself perfectly to mock-up graphics, entrance concepts, and aesthetic discussions. I've seen fan art for theoretical new Shield merchandise that honestly looks better than some official WWE designs. YouTube is where the deep dives happen. Long-form analysis videos, detailed breakdowns of why certain combinations would work, historical comparisons to the Shield's original run. Some of these videos are getting hundreds of thousands of views, which tells you this isn't just a niche internet thing. There's real mainstream interest. But here's what makes the genesis of this movement so special. It wasn't manufactured by WWE or pushed by wrestling media. This was purely organic fan creation. It started because wrestling fans recognized something special and wanted to explore it together. That kind of grassroots enthusiasm is rare in modern wrestling fandom, where so much discussion gets shaped by official narratives and media coverage. The early adopters of the new Shield movement were primarily what I'd call hardcore casual fans. You know, the type people who watch WWE regularly, follow wrestling news, and have strong opinions about creative direction, but aren't necessarily the super hardcore fans who analyze work rate and watch every indie promotion. These are fans who understand good storytelling and character development because that's what originally drew them to wrestling. Within 3 months of that original Reddit post, New Shield had become a recognized concept across wrestling social media. Wrestling news sites started covering fan theories. WWE wrestlers themselves began acknowledging the discussions in interviews and social media posts. And that's when phase 2 of the movement really began. Because once the concept had mainstream recognition within wrestling fandom, it evolved from simple roster speculation into something much more sophisticated. The community had created something bigger than fantasy booking. They'd created a framework for analyzing WWE's roster potential that WWE itself seemed to be missing. And the specific theories that emerged from this framework, some of them are absolutely brilliant. Okay, so now we get to the really fun part, the actual theories that have dominated New Shield discussions. And trust me, some of these are so well thought out that I genuinely think WWE should be taking notes. I'm not even kidding when I say that some fan theories have better character development arcs than actual WWE storylines from the past 2 years. Let me start with what I consider the absolute best new Shield theory that's gained traction, because it's going to blow your mind how perfect it is when you really think about it through. Are you ready for this? Damian Priest, Dominic Mysterio, and, wait for it, Rhea Ripley. I know, you're probably thinking, wait, Rhea's not a guy. How is this supposed to be the new Shield? But hear me out, because this theory addresses something the original Shield never could, and it's actually genius when you break it down. The original Shield was revolutionary because they broke traditional WWE presentation rules. They came through the crowd, they had this paramilitary aesthetic, they felt dangerous and unpredictable. They weren't cookie-cutter WWE superstars SPS, they were something different. Now, what would be the modern equivalent of that rule-breaking presentation? A mixed-gender faction that operates as equals. Think about it. WWE has never had a stable where men and women were presented as completely equal members of the same unit. It's always been romance angles, protective relationships, or women as managers for male wrestlers. But Priest, Dom, and Rhea, they already have established chemistry from their Judgment Day connections. They each bring different but complementary skills, and their size dynamic actually works better than most all-male combinations. Priest as the powerhouse enforcer, Dom as the cunning opportunist who can take shortcuts to victory, and Rhea as the psychological warfare specialist who gets in opponents' heads. This theory emerged from a Twitter user called @ShieldEvolution, who created this incredibly detailed breakdown of how their character dynamics would work. They analyzed everything: entrance possibilities, match combinations, storyline potential, even merchandise opportunities. It was like reading a complete creative treatment for a year-long storyline arc. But what made this theory catch fire wasn't just the analysis. It was the recognition that WWE already has these pieces in play, but isn't using them correctly. Judgment Day has been this close to being something special multiple times, but WWE keeps making creative decisions that undermine their potential. The second major theory that's dominated discussions is what fans call the homegrown Shield: Theory, Braun Breaker, and Carmelo Hayes. This one appeals to fans who want to see WWE invest in developing their own talent, rather than relying on established stars or outside acquisitions. The psychology behind this theory is fascinating because it represents hope for WWE's future. Theory's already established as a main event player. Breaker has that rare combination of athleticism and natural charisma that can't be taught, and Hayes brings technical excellence and veteran ring psychology despite his young age. What I love about this theory is how fans have mapped out the entire development arc. They don't just want to see these three guys thrown together. They've created detailed storylines about how they'd meet, why they'd unite, what their common goals would be, and how their individual characters would evolve through the group dynamic. One fan on Reddit, username NXTFuture, wrote this epic post breaking down how this new Shield would be different from the original because they'd be fighting for opportunity rather than fighting against authority. Instead of being rebels, they'd be young lions, proving they deserve their spots. It's the same energy, but channeled differently based on where WWE is as a company now versus where they were in 2012. The International Shield theory has gained massive traction outside the United States, and it's really cool to see how different wrestling cultures interpret the new Shield concept. The most popular international theory combines Gunther, Ilja Dragunov, and Ludwig Kaiser, essentially a European powerhouse faction that could dominate based on technical excellence and physical intensity. This theory resonates particularly strongly with fans who feel like WWE's international talent often gets underutilized or pigeonholed into stereotypical characters. The European Shield concept allows these wrestlers to maintain their cultural identities while being presented as equals to any American stars. I was reading through wrestling forums from different countries, and it's amazing how the new Shield concept has been adapted to reflect local wrestling preferences. Japanese fans tend to focus on technical combinations and fighting spirit elements. UK fans emphasize storytelling and character development. Mexican fans bring lucha traditions and family legacy aspects into their theories. It's like the new Shield concept has become this universal language for how do we create something special with current talent. But each culture brings its own flavor to the interpretation. But here's where things get really interesting and controversial. There's a growing movement within New Shield discussions that argues WWE should completely abandon trying to recreate the Shield's specific dynamic and instead focus on creating something entirely new that just happens to involve three wrestlers. The anti-Shield Shield theory suggests that the most effective new Shield would be three wrestlers who are nothing like the original members, but who capture the same sense of inevitable dominance. The most popular version of this theory? Cody Rhodes, Kevin Owens, and Sami Zayn. Now, this might seem weird at first because these are all established individual stars with their own storylines and character motivations. But that's exactly why some fans think it would work. Instead of trying to manufacture chemistry between wrestlers who don't know each other well, you'd be building on existing relationships and natural dynamics. The fan theory breakdown I read about this combination was incredible. It focused on how their different storytelling styles would complement each other. Cody's traditional babyface hero journey, Kevin's morally complex anti-hero persona, and Sami's everyman underdog appeal. Together, they'd represent different aspects of what wrestling fans want to see, united by their shared goal of elevating wrestling quality. But you want to know the theory that's gotten the most attention recently? The one that has wrestling Twitter absolutely divided and has sparked some of the most passionate debates I've ever seen in wrestling fandom. The Women's Shield. Rhea Ripley, Bianca Belair, and Roxanne Perez. And before you roll your eyes thinking this is just, let's do the same thing, but with women. The theoretical framework behind this combination is actually revolutionary for how WWE presents female wrestlers. The argument isn't that these three women should copy the Shield's presentation or storylines. It's that WWE has never allowed women to be presented with the same level of dominance and inevitability that the Shield had. They've never had a women's faction that felt truly unstoppable, that could main event shows, that could carry feuds across multiple pay-per-views without feeling like they're filling time between men's storylines. This theory has sparked massive debates about gender representation in wrestling, creative limitations on women's storylines, and whether WWE would ever have the courage to present women with the same level of importance they gave the Shield during their peak run. The more I've studied these different new Shield theories, the more I realize they're not really about wrestling moves or entrance music or merchandise designs. They're about fans recognizing potential that WWE isn't maximizing and creating collaborative visions of what wrestling could be. Each theory represents different values and priorities within wrestling fandom. The mixed gender theories prioritize progressive representation. The homegrown theories prioritize talent development. The international theories prioritize cultural diversity. The anti-Shield theories prioritize creative innovation. But they all share one common element: the belief that WWE currently has the pieces to create something special, but they're not putting them together correctly. And that brings us to the real truth behind why these theories resonate so deeply. All right, here's where we get to the meat of it. Why this whole new Shield phenomenon has captured wrestling fans' imaginations so completely. And the truth? It's way more complex and frankly more emotional than just fans want good wrestling. I had this realization while I was researching this video, sitting in my car after a live WWE show, Monday Night Raw in Chicago, specifically. I'm watching fans file out of the arena, and I'm hearing all these conversations about what they just saw. Not complaints, exactly, but this underlying sense of unfulfilled potential. People were talking about how good the individual matches were, how talented the wrestlers are, how much they enjoyed certain moments. But there was this persistent feeling that something was missing, that with all this incredible talent, WWE should be creating more moments that feel truly special, truly unmissable. That's when it clicked for me. The new Shield phenomenon isn't really about wanting a new version of the Shield. It's about recognizing that WWE currently has multiple combinations of wrestlers who could create that same sense of magic, but they're not being given the opportunity or creative support to do it. Think about what the Shield represented during their peak run. They weren't just three talented wrestlers working together, they were this perfect storm of chemistry, timing, presentation, and creative commitment from WWE. Every element aligned to create something that felt bigger than the sum of its parts. The truth is, wrestling fans are desperate for that feeling again. Not nostalgia for the Shield specifically, but that sense of witnessing something truly special in real time. That feeling of, holy shit, this is going to be legendary. That happens so rarely in modern WWE programming. The original Shield gave fans multiple moments that felt historic as they were happening. The debut at Survivor Series, the destruction of The Undertaker and Team Hell No, their WrestleMania match against Evolution, even their eventual breakup. Each moment felt significant in a way that transcended normal wrestling storytelling. And here's what's honestly kind of heartbreaking about the new Shield movement. Fans are essentially doing WWE's creative work for them. They're identifying talent combinations, developing character dynamics, and creating storyline frameworks that could generate that same level of excitement. But WWE isn't paying attention. I've read hundreds of new Shield theories at this point, and some of them are genuinely brilliant. Detailed character development arcs, logical story progressions, natural chemistry between wrestlers who already know each other well. It's like fans are holding up a mirror to WWE saying, look, you have everything you need to create something amazing. But the deeper truth about why new Shield theories resonate goes beyond just wanting good wrestling entertainment. It taps into something fundamental about how we process potential and disappointment in the things we care about. Wrestling fans are unique in how emotionally invested they become in the success of their favorite promotion. We want WWE to be great because we love wrestling, and we can see all the pieces that could make it great. The new Shield phenomenon is essentially fans saying, we know you can do better, and here's exactly how. In my opinion, this connects to a larger cultural moment where audiences are more engaged with the creative process than ever before. Social media has given fans unprecedented access to behind-the-scenes information and direct communication with performers. We see the talent, we understand the business challenges, and we develop our own ideas about creative solutions. The new Shield movement represents this perfectly. Fans aren't just passive consumers hoping WWE will randomly stumble into creating something great. They're active participants in reimagining what WWE could become if they made different creative decisions. I started tracking how often new Shield theories accurately predict successful WWE storylines or character developments. It's honestly shocking how often fans get it right. The Judgment Day's evolution, LA Knight's character development, the women's division's creative direction. In multiple cases, fan theories anticipated successful creative moves months before they happened on TV. This suggests that the new Shield community has developed genuine insight into what makes WWE programming work. They're not just fantasy booking based on personal preferences. They're analyzing character dynamics, audience psychology, and storytelling structure with real sophistication. But here's what makes this phenomenon really special. It's created this incredible sense of community among wrestling fans who share similar values and creative instincts. New Shield discussions bring together fans from different demographics, different wrestling backgrounds, and different geographic regions, united by their shared vision of what WWE could become. I've seen Twitter threads about new Shield theories that turn into genuine creative collaborations. Fans building off each other's ideas, refining concepts, creating elaborate storyline timelines that span months or years. It's collaborative storytelling at its best, driven by passion for the medium rather than any commercial motivation. The business implications are actually huge when you think about it. The New Shield movement represents a passionate, engaged audience segment that's literally telling WWE what they want to buy. These aren't casual fans making random requests. These are dedicated viewers who understand wrestling well enough to create detailed, creative frameworks. If WWE paid attention to new Shield theories and actually implemented some of the better ideas, they'd be essentially guaranteed to create content that resonates with their most engaged audience segment. It's like having free market research from your most valuable customers. What really gets me about this whole thing is how much creative energy fans are putting into improving something they love. The time and thought that goes into detailed new Shield theories represents genuine investment in WWE's success. Fans want the company to thrive. They want the wrestlers to reach their potential, and they want wrestling to be as great as they know it can be. The new Shield phenomenon is ultimately an expression of hope. Hope that WWE will recognize the potential in their current roster, hope that they'll take creative risks, hope that they'll create something that captures the same magic the Shield did during their peak years. And that hope might not be misplaced, because there are signs that WWE is starting to pay attention to what their most engaged fans are saying. The question is whether they'll have the creative courage to act on it. So where does this all go from here? Because the new Shield phenomenon has reached this fascinating tipping point where it's become too big for WWE to ignore, but too organic for them to directly control. And honestly, the next phase could completely change how we think about fan influence on wrestling creative. I've been tracking some interesting patterns in WWE's recent creative decisions. And there are definitely signs that someone in the company is paying attention to New Shield discussions. I'm not saying they're directly adapting fan theories, but the increased focus on faction development, the way they're presenting newer talent, and some specific character pairing choices, it feels intentional. Perfect example, the way they've been handling Judgment Day's evolution over the past 6 months. If you compare their creative direction to the most popular New Shield theories involving those wrestlers, there are some remarkable similarities. The emphasis on equal presentation among members, the focus on dominance rather than comedy, the way they're building individual personalities within the group dynamic. Coincidence? Maybe. But when you see this pattern across multiple storylines and character developments, it starts feeling like someone in WWE creative is at least aware of what fans are discussing in New Shield communities. Here's what's really exciting, though. The New Shield movement has evolved beyond just roster speculation. It's become this framework for analyzing wrestling potential that fans are applying to other promotions, other creative scenarios, other ways of thinking about what wrestling could become. I've seen New Shield-style analysis applied to AEW roster combinations, to indie wrestling stables, even to theoretical interpromotional dream scenarios. The concept has transcended WWE-specific fantasy booking and become this broader methodology for understanding what makes wrestling special. Last month, I attended this indie wrestling show in Philadelphia, and I overheard these two fans discussing the main event faction using New Shield terminology. They weren't talking about WWE at all, but they were using the analytical framework that the New Shield community developed to evaluate what they were seeing live. That's when I realized this phenomenon has created its own vocabulary and critical methodology that wrestling fans can apply across different contexts. It's like the New Shield movement accidentally developed a new way of thinking about wrestling that's bigger than any specific roster or promotion. But here's where things could get really interesting in the next year or two. Triple H's creative leadership has shown more willingness to acknowledge and incorporate fan feedback than WWE has historically demonstrated. And the New Shield community represents exactly the kind of passionate, engaged audience that WWE wants to cultivate. What if WWE actually started directly engaging with New Shield theories? Not by copying them exactly, but by acknowledging the creative insight that fans are demonstrating and creating opportunities for that insight to influence actual programming? I genuinely think we're going to see WWE experiment with more faction-based storytelling over the next year, and I think some of those factions will bear striking resemblances to popular New Shield theories. Not because they're copying fan ideas, but because fans and WWE creative are recognizing the same potential in the current roster. The Damian Priest, Rhea Ripley combination that's been central to so many New Shield theories, I think we're going to see that developed further, possibly with the addition of a third member who fits the dynamic that fans have been predicting. But the most fascinating possibility is that the New Shield movement might influence how WWE thinks about creating new factions from scratch. Instead of just randomly throwing wrestlers together and hoping chemistry develops, they might start analyzing potential combinations using the same kind of detailed character and dynamic assessment that New Shield fans have been doing. The community has essentially created a blueprint for faction development that considers personality, compatibility, visual dynamics, storyline potential, and long-term character development. That's incredibly valuable creative insight that any wrestling promotion could benefit from. What makes me most optimistic about the future of this phenomenon is how it's inspired fans to become more actively engaged with wrestling creative rather than just passively consuming whatever they're given. The New Shield community has shown that fans can provide genuinely useful creative input when they approach it with knowledge, passion, and collaborative spirit. I've seen fan-created content related to New Shield theories that rivals professional wrestling analysis in terms of quality and insight. Graphics, video packages, detailed storyline treatments, character development frameworks, SIM, the level of creative investment is incredible. This represents a fundamental shift in how wrestling fandom operates. Instead of just reacting to what promotions create, fans are proactively developing creative visions and sharing them with like-minded community members. It's collaborative fandom at its best, and it's creating better creative ideas than many professional wrestling writers are producing. The New Shield movement has proven that passionate, knowledgeable fans can identify potential that professional creative teams miss. They can develop character combinations and storyline frameworks that maximize wrestler potential in ways that might not be obvious to people who are too close to the business side of wrestling. So what happens next depends partly on whether WWE recognizes the value of what the New Shield community has created, but it also depends on whether fans continue to approach wrestling with this level of creative engagement and collaborative spirit. The movement has already succeeded in creating something valuable, a passionate community of fans who share similar creative values and who support each other's ideas about how wrestling could be better. That's worth preserving regardless of whether WWE directly incorporates any specific fan theories. But I want to hear from you. After everything we've discussed, what's your take on the New Shield phenomenon? Do you think WWE should be paying more attention to these fan theories? Which New Shield combination do you think has the most potential? And more importantly, what does this whole movement tell us about the future of wrestling fandom and fan influence on creative decisions? Because honestly, I think we're just seeing the beginning of how engaged wrestling fans can shape the products they love.